Welcome to the Iowa State Fair. My name is Sherwin, and I'm the pastor of Laketon Bethel in Muskegon. Today, we decided that we would just try to record at the Iowa State Fair. As you can see behind me is one of the main fairways. You're going to be seeing lots of folks walking through there, about 110,000 a day. So that's kind of interesting. Today, I want to talk to you about finding exuberance for life in your faith. So often we miss out on that, and today I want to talk about that. But the first three slides in the PowerPoint, the first one is Diane standing by this wonderful little pitcher. Second one is a smoker. They had a cooking contest yesterday. I got some slides from that. And then the third slide that you'll see in the PowerPoint is a 3,000-pound bull. He is the Super Bull of the Iowa State Fair, and that's a lot of bull, let me tell you. All right, so I want to talk to you about finding this exuberance in life. Many of the things that Christians can experience, we don't. We just kind of forget the benefits of our faith. Like saying, "This is the day the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it." That's a good thing to say all the time. We should say that at the beginning of every worship service, beginning of every day, to find that joy and exuberance that's possible. Now, I have Mac computers at home, and I'm in fact recording this with an iPhone because I kind of like the Mac stuff. But my Macs have a magic trackpad, and that works fine except for when I'm cutting and pasting or making PowerPoints. I was getting really frustrated with that, and I almost went and bought myself a regular mouse. Because when you make slideshows, I have to copy from manuscripts to the slides. There's no mouse on the Mac. Frustrated because sometimes it took me 3 tries to get that done. My son was home, click, click, showed me how to do it. Now I've been using Macs for 3 years. This feature was available to me, make it so much easier. But I didn't know it was there. My son had to show me. It was there. I just wasn't using it. The Iowa State Fairgrounds here is kind of a habitat for 4-wheel drive pickups. And I remember one time here in Michigan, a kid rode his dad's new pickup off the road on somebody's lawn, and it got stuck. He was crying. He knew he was in a lot of trouble. I was walking, and I said, "Would you like me to try?" I got in the pickup. First thing I noticed, the 4-wheel drive was not engaged. I pushed the little button on the dash, and the pickup backed right out. Again, there was something there that could be used, but wasn't, because he didn't know it was there. Do you know how to use all the apps on your phone? I'm certain that you don't. At least if you were born after 1980, you might, but if you're before that, you probably don't. We all have resources that we don't use, benefits that we don't use to our advantage. And the same is true for our faith walk. I've been a follower of Jesus my whole life, but I don't always use his benefits, and that's my own fault. The Bible does talk about this in Paul's letter to the Galatians, chapter 5. I'm using the Message paraphrase here because I think it makes every word really jump out at you. Now, we know a little bit about apples in Michigan, so I'm using that as a background slide here. But this is how Paul words this. What happens when we live God's way? He brings gifts into our lives, much the same way that fruit appears in an orchard. Things like affection for others, exuberance about life, serenity. We live God's way, and gifts come to us, like fruit in an orchard. And we know orchards. We love Michigan apples. We love to go get them in the fall. This says that God sends us gifts like that. They go through a growing process, and then they appear. Starting with affection for others, we start seeing people the way Jesus sees them. We see the have-nots the way Jesus sees them, the hungry, the sick, the mentally ill, those who've been kicked to the curb, those who've harmed us, and we forgive them 70 times 7. We get exuberance about life. We say, this is the day the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. One of the fruits that he gives us is that we're excited to live and to work and to play, looking forward to each day. Then he gives us serenity. We develop a lack of anxiety because we know that he's got it under control. We get a deep inner peace. We can live an untroubled life, confident for the future, and at peace with the past. The word serenity here, that's translated as serenity here, comes from the Greek word eirene, which comes from the Hebrew word shalom, which means, in my translation, shalom means everything's cool. With God, with people, and with yourself. And there's even more benefits. As the passage goes on, it reads like this. We develop a willingness to stick to things, a sense of compassion in the heart, a conviction that a basic holiness permeates things and people. We find ourselves involved in loyal commitments, not needing to force our way in life, able to marshal and direct our energies wisely. So let's look at that passage. It says we stick to things. We don't give up quickly. And underlying that is a compassion in the heart. We care about people naturally. It's one of those fruits that comes into our lives. We help when we can. And then Paul says this, there's a conviction of basic holiness that permeates things and people. That means we see God's goodness all around us. We see goodness in this fair traffic. We see goodness in all sorts of things. This conviction of basic holiness is real positive thinking. It is the antidote to negative thinking. It's gratitude thinking. We find good in all the circumstances. And he says, and we can make loyal commitments. We establish relationships that work because we don't have to be right all the time. He says we don't need to force our way. We don't need to prove that we're right, because Paul knew what many people know today is that you can't be happy and right at the same time. You don't need to get your way all the time. You can spend your energies wisely. All of this shows up in our lives like fruit on a tree when we choose to report for duty. Paul goes on, he says, legalism is helpless in bringing this about. It only gets in the way. Among those who belong to Christ, everything connected with getting our own way and mindlessly responding to what everyone else calls necessities is killed off for good. It's crucified. See, every word of this passage is gold. Legalism doesn't help. It kills fruit. It's the worm in the apples, or as Jesus said, it's the yeast in the bread. It's nasty. Legalism doesn't work. Just look at the second sentence of this passage, and you see that. And then the pressure of getting our own way is crucified. Peer pressure is crucified. We don't have to do what everyone else is doing. We don't follow the mindless crowd. There's no doubt that this is the best way to live. One more paragraph. Since this is the kind of life we have chosen, the life of the Spirit, let's make sure that we do not just hold it as an idea in our heads or a sentiment in our hearts, but work out its implications in every detail of our lives. So what he says here is let the Spirit affect everything in your life. That's how you treat people, how you treat God, every detail of our lives. Remember, you represent Jesus. He concludes with this. That means we will not compare ourselves with each other as if one of us were better and another worse. We have far more interesting things to do with our lives. Each of us is an individual. So don't compare yourself ever again to anyone else. There's no need. That's not the standard by which we operate. And that's a relief. It's like taking tight shoes off after walking a couple of miles. Yesterday at this fair, We walked and walked and walked about 8 miles. Got to the car. First thing I did was I took my shoes off. Tremendous sensation of freedom. That's what happens when you give your life to Christ. You can take those tight fitting, legalistic things off. As Paul says, we have more interesting things to do because you are an original. You're created for a task that is unique to you. So there's lots of liberating words in this passage. When you give yourself to Jesus, things change. You morph from being immature and self centered to giving in kind. The fruit appears, the gifts are listed in this passage. You no longer worry about the perception of others. Instead, you serve others and you reap peace. You have to just let it happen to you. Don't resist what God is trying to do in your life. And the results will be a life that you like, all kinds of benefits, and more people will like you because you stop being a jerk. It's very simple. So enjoy the gifts that God gives you. Enjoy the Iowa State Fair. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I hope you enjoy this video as much as I've enjoyed making it. So, as always, thanks for listening.